Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. In the fall, I made a primitive decor piece that I called Ichabod, and I'll include a link here, I think, and in the description if you're curious about that piece. I do love the primitive style because to me it represents a sort of a reuse of materials, and I like that recycling aspect. And usually it's natural materials like cottons and wools, woods and metals, and I do like those materials. So I'd like to do something similar to that for the spring, although there won't be quite as much of a reuse component to it because I love some of the spring items that Dollar Tree has in, so I do want to use some of those items. Let's go have some fun.
I wanted this to be a primitive style bunny, so I looked around my house for a pair of old knit gloves, but I didn't have any. So I bought these gloves at the Dollar Tree. They're not knit, they're this sort of pebbly, bright pink, but I did like the color and the texture, so I thought this won't be quite as primitive as I would have liked. So take one of the gloves and push inside the middle finger and the pinky finger. Leave up the thumb, the first finger, and the ring finger. You can see here I pushed the thumb in. That was a mistake because I end up using the thumb as one of the bunny's arms. Now if you don't like to sew, you could easily glue this. I like to sew, so I just stitched closed those areas where I had pushed the fingers into the glove. I then stuffed the two fingers that were remaining, which are going to be the bunny's ears, and the top of the glove with some fiber fill. Now I want to make a turtleneck for the bunny. You can see I have these beautiful brown socks, but I'm not done wearing these beautiful brown socks. So I'm going to knit a turtleneck for the bunny. Now this is a relatively easy knit, but if you want to use socks, use socks. I would have used socks if I'd had some to spare. So for this knit, I used a 4mm needle, and I used the taupe yarn from the Dollar Tree, and I cast on 30 stitches. So I wanted to do a ribbing that was 2 knit 1 purl on the front. So for the first row, I'm going to have a garter edge, so always knit 1 to start and knit 1 to end. So for the first row, knit 1, purl 1, then knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, all the way to the end. You'll end with a purl and then 1 more knit for the garter edge. Turn it over, and when you knit the wrong side, knit 2, purl 2, now knit 1, purl 2, knit 1, purl 2, knit 1, purl 2, all the way to the end where you'll knit 1 and then knit 1 more for the garter edge. It's helpful, especially when you're just starting out the knit, to write that down and be very mindful. Once you've done a few rows, you can easily see from the fabric where you have been knitting and where you have been purling, and it is much easier than to follow the pattern. So I knit that until I felt long enough to cover the rabbit's body, about 5 inches maybe, and then I just bound off at the top. So to bind off, knit 2 stitches onto your right needle, and then pull that first stitch over the second stitch and off, knit another stitch, pull the inner stitch over the outer stitch and off, and just continue to the end, then snip the yarn, put it through the loop that you have, and pull it tight. Once I had knit 2 of these pieces, one for the front and one for the back of the rabbit's turtleneck, I then did a sort of makeshift weaving in of the ends. I just basically pulled them through that garter on the edge and back down and cut them off. Now for the rabbit, as I mentioned, I decided that I wanted the thumb to be his arm. So I did have to snip the stitches that I had done and pull the thumb out. You can see here I have pushed 2 pins in just to stand in for the eyes. That's not how we're going to do the eyes. I was just trying to figure out where I wanted them to be. So for the eyes, I used a couple of black seed beads. I happen to already have these from making jewelry in the past. I didn't like the way they looked quite as much as the pinheads, which obviously don't have a hole in them, but I thought they were okay, pretty good. And this is again something that you don't need to stitch onto the rabbit, that you could glue on. I did have to take the fiber fill out in order to sew that properly. It kept getting in my way. And then once I had sewn those on, I just cut a tiny little piece of felt for the rabbit's nose. I debated giving him a nose or not. Of course, how you do your rabbit's face is up to you, but I decided to give him a nose, and I just put that between the eyes and put a couple of stitches through it, and then knotted it up and restuffed him with the fiber fill. Now for the rabbit's body, other arm, and legs, we're going to use the other glove. So I did basically the same thing, pushed in the pinky finger and the middle finger, and I pulled it up onto the other glove a little bit skewed because I'm trying to get that thumb up as high as I can. His arms are not going to be symmetrical, but we want to get them as close as we can. And I didn't sew that or anything. I just stuffed that body with a little bit of fiber fill and then pulled the one glove over the other, and that's all I did. Now for the sweater, I debated whether I would make sleeves or not, and then decided because this is a spring craft, we wouldn't put sleeves on. And so what I'm going to do is just sew up the edges of the 2 pieces of fabric, so sew them together, right sides together, and just leave a little hole in each one where each arm will go through. Now those are 2 different places because one arm is higher than the other. So I just held it against the rabbit to figure out where to leave the hole. And I just did some stitching, and then where the hole is, I just drew the yarn through that garter edge and then continued stitching down at the bottom. It was quite easy. If you're using a sock for this step, then all you really need to do is cut some slits in the sock and pull the arms through. I turned this right side out, pulled it over the rabbit, and pulled the arms through, and then I thought I would like to tighten up the collar a little bit. So I took some more yarn and just sewed it through the knitting. You can't see it at all. I just put it through and then on the inside pulled it tight and tied it. Now I want to give him some overalls, and I have this nice dark gray fabric from the Dollar Tree, and this is one of their 18-inch by 21-inch rectangles of fabric that they sell. And I like the texture of this fabric. It's nice and soft, but it also has a little bit of a denim sort of look. And I had used a piece of this fabric previously for a hat for a gnome. So I cut 2 pieces roughly 7 inches by 8 inches. They ended up being a little bit wider than I needed, and maybe I would have wanted them a little bit longer. And I held them up to the rabbit and basically just pinned and cut them until I had a sort of a bib shape on the front of one of them, and for the other it of course will be shorter because we don't need a bib in the back, so I sliced off the top of that. And then to stitch around that, I did want a primitive look, but I decided I wanted a similar color to this gray fabric. So I took some black embroidery floss and just did a really rough stitch, a sort of a running stitch around the edge of the bib and the fabric that's on the sides of the bib and the fabric along the back. I then just used regular thread, put right sides together, and sewed down the sides and then up the seam where the two legs are. Now this first version of this I felt was a poor fit. I want this to be primitive, but it was a little too primitive, so I made it a little bit narrower. I did have enough fabric that I was able to cuff up the bottom of the little legs, but I think I would have liked to cuff that up more. That's why I think I would want this to be a little bit longer. I was really lucky once, and I found this macrame cotton twine at the Dollar Tree. I haven't seen it there since. You can certainly purchase this on Amazon or at a fabric store. And I'm going to use this to hold up the little overalls. And this is really primitive. I'm just poking holes. I'm not sewing buttonholes or anything. So I just poked a hole through the front, threaded the macrame twine through and tied a knot. And then I poked a hole in the middle of the back, threaded it through, brought it up around to the other side, trimmed it, and then tied a knot there. The only issue is he doesn't really have a left shoulder because that other thumb is so low. So I did stitch around that a little bit onto the turtleneck just to hold it in place as if he did have a shoulder there. And now normally I would give him a little pocket in the front or some patches or something, but I think the accessories will obscure that, and the accessories are so much fun. I have this little garden pick from the Dollar Tree, which is shaped like a little watering can, and I thought that was so adorable. And wouldn't it be fun if our bunny were a sort of gardening bunny? Now the pick came off pretty easily. I just sort of rocked it back and forth a little bit. It does leave a hole in the bottom, so we wouldn't be able to really use this for a watering can, but that's okay. We're going to put carrots in it because they have these wonderful twine carrots at the Dollar Tree, or I hope they have them this year. I bought them last year. And so I'm going to put 3 carrots in there, and our bunny can hold that. And of course, anything I do with thread, you can do with glue if you prefer. I decided to stitch that to the bunny, so I just stitched his arm around the 2 places where he's touching the watering can, the little handle and the little spout, and that worked very well for him holding on to the watering can. And here he is.
So what did you think of our little primitive bunny? Please tell me in the comments. Also, I haven't named him yet, so if you have an idea for a name, I'd love to hear it. I really enjoyed making him, and he was so easy to make, so little sewing, and I think you could get by with no sewing at all if you wanted to. And I just did love these little items from the Dollar Tree, particularly this little watering can. So I thought it was just perfect for this little craft. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with us today. Take care.